The FNaF 3 protagonist is a heavily debated topic, but if you clicked on this video, you most likely already know that. I've already discussed the identity of who the protagonist is at length in my FNaF 3 guard breakdown video, which I recommend you watch before this one, because this video is basically a sequel to that. You don't need to, but I'd like you to, because I get more watch time. I'm pretty happy with that video overall, except for the part where I said Mike was always the protagonist of all three games. Probably around FNaF 4 is where I think he retroactively became the protagonist of all the games. In case you didn't watch that video, basically I think that Hudson and Mike both have a good chance of being the guard. However, I think Mike beats him out because of the phantom versions of Freddy and especially Foxy being the withered versions, which cannot be explained from the props in the building like the other phantoms. It probably also has something to do with Fazbear Fright itself, because there are no phantoms in FNaF 6, which makes no sense no matter who the guard is, unless it's tied to the location of Fazbear Fright somehow. Maybe the agony from the location with all the Freddy parts from the past being in one place. Probably the same reason Shadow Freddy is there, you know, the agony. Anyway, side tangent out of the way, I think Mike's the guard. But something I proposed at the end of that video was the possibility that both Mike and Hudson worked at Fazbear Fright. And today I want to go over that theory more in depth, because I only talked about it for 2 minutes in that last video, and it was right at the end. So with that said, let's move on to the basic concept. Now, I think this is going to make a lot of Hudson guarders happy, because under this idea, Hudson is the night guard. Theoretically, Mike could be the guard, but the basic idea spawns from what we found, and Hudson is the night guard in that story. So it would be weird for him not to be the guard if I'm going to base the idea off of what we found anyway. When I read what we found for my FrightGuard video, one character stood out to me. Virgil, an older security guard who works the day shift at Fazbear Fright. Right away, I thought of Mike, because at the time of what we found in FNaF 3, Mike would be an older guy, in his late 40s to early 50s in 2023, if that's when FNaF 3 takes place. Now, I'm not sure if it's ever stated how much older Virgil is compared to Hudson, who is only 23. If Virgil's only in his early 30s, that could be considered old to Hudson, or older, but still caught my eye. Even if Virgil's in his 30s, a security guard that's older than the rest is still interesting to include. That's what I thought. Already, this theory was starting to brew in my mind, and then I got more evidence when I started looking at the logbook. Me and the logbook are kind of in a weird spot right now. I do think it's meta, right? Probably meta. However, I do also think it probably has a time it takes place. I don't think it's like something that just like happens over multiple years. I think there is a set time it takes place. When is that? I don't know. Definitely after Sister Location, but I'm not sure if it takes place during FNaF 3 or not. The fact it is said to be made by Fazbear Entertainment seems to imply that, okay, yeah, the Fright crew didn't make this. But then again, Phone Dude has that line of wanting the place to feel authentic.
It'll make it feel really authentic, I think.
And the fact that the logbook is an activity book makes me think that, you know, okay, this is some prop that was used at Fazbear Frights for the actual night guard actor or something. But then the Springlock quiz comes in, it's a whole mess. There's also the possibility that Fazbear Entertainment could have a role in Fazbear Fright, in that it was an earlier attempt to rebrand like in Help Wanted, but that's just speculation. However, I still think the FNaF 3 references are not something to be overlooked. Let's talk about Logbook Foxy and why I still believe he represents Mike and not Phone Guy. My reasoning stays the same as in my last video, the magazine. But let's go deeper. Now, a common belief I see is that the magazine is just a reference to Sister Location. That's valid to think. I mean, that's true. It is a reference to Sister Location. I mean, Mike didn't actually get the job at Circus Babies because of the magazine, right? Well, actually, okay, hear me out. Did Mike work at the bunk because of the magazine? Of course not. However, what I think a lot of people forget is that Mike does actually legally work at the bunker. He'd be fired.
That you will be promptly rescued, fired, then sent home.
Have his pay deducted.
It's worth mentioning that due to your lackluster performance yesterday, your pay has been decreased by a substantial amount.
And he also gets his rewards at the end of the week. He is a real employee, so he would have to apply for the job. And I think he did that from the magazine. Also, while we're on the topic again, I just want to say headcanon I developed literally when writing the script. Basically, all the potential reasons Hand Unit said for Mike working at Circus Babies are actually sort of the reasons Mike worked at the Freddy's locations.
Whether you were approached at a job fair, read our ad and screws, bolts, and hairpins, or if this is the result of a dare, we welcome you.
Anyway, yeah, I just want to throw that out there. Probably isn't canon, but it's a cool idea. Anyway, back to Logbook Foxy. Another reason I think Mike is Foxy is because of him being a security guard. And while yes, Phone Guy was a security guard and his tapes were played in the FNaF 3 office, he was not a security guard during those tapes. That was not what he was. As far as we know, he was some sort of trainer. Now, what about Phone Guy's quotes in the logbook? That is a good point. My first idea is that these are things Mike is saying to himself. Basically, now he's getting the hang of the job and is asking himself what is he still doing at Fazbear Fright, because he hasn't got any leads on William yet. I also have another explanation that I'll get to later. Another reason I believe Mike to have worked at Fazbear Fright is because I'm 95% sure Mike burned down Fazbear Fright. First off, I'm sure the fire was not an accident. Not only the mention of foul play, but also the fact that it hasn't been ruled out seems to me that's basically telling us, yeah, it's not just faulty wiring. Now, Hudson Guard has his own explanation to this that I didn't know at the time, which is Hudson burned down Fazbear Fright basically because he couldn't handle going up against Springtrap and the Phantoms anymore, which makes sense and is actually pretty narratively satisfying for the game itself. However, what really pushes me to think Mike is actually the one who burned it down is the Immortal and the Restless. I've talked about the Immortal and the Restless multiple times on this channel. Clara, we know she's Mike from the Logbook, burns down Vlad, who represents either Fazbear Entertainment or William, probably William though, because this came from Sister Location, which was a very Afton family heavy game. She burns down Vlad's house. So basically Mike burns down William's house is basically what happened. You could argue that this is FNaF 6, but the problem with that is that Mike didn't know about Henry's plan, and also Henry was the one to set the FNaF 6 fire. Now I could be looking too far into this, but I think judging from how the fires are very important in the series, and how the final cutscene of the game is the charred remains of Fazbear Fright, I think Scott could be implying that yeah, Mike did burn down Fazbear Fright. Oh yeah, the cutscene. Let's talk about it. I don't really have much to say about this cutscene, except I think some people forget this cutscene has multiple interpretations, and we don't know which one is correct. Like, I've seen people on both sides act like this cutscene is the most important piece of evidence for both sides, when it's really not. The two main interpretations of this cutscene is that Mike is saying that he plans to find William, while the visuals show that the fire is the outcome of him finding William. So it's like what he's saying, what he's planning, and then the outcome of his plan. The other interpretation is that the fire is what will eventually lead Michael to find William in FNaF 6. It's impossible to know which interpretation is correct, because we don't know who the guard is. Now, I'm sure you guys have figured out by now, I believe the first one, but I can see the logic in the second. Anyway, I just want to rant about that because it kind of fucking pisses me off, I can't lie. I just see people act like it's some sort of gospel when it's really not. It's all up for interpretation. Oh, another fucking rant, don't worry. Let's talk about William's line in FFPS.
You may not recognize me at first, but I assure you, it's still me.
A lot of people take this line to mean Mike could not have seen William before Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. I don't know why I said the full version this time, because why wouldn't he recognize his father? I already think I explained why this isn't really a good piece of evidence in my previous video, so I'll just play that here. But guys, come on, look at them. We have people who still think they're completely different characters.
Springtrap is Burn Trap, but is not Scrap Trap.
Also, William is even saying that Mike wouldn't recognize him. He's just saying it's a possibility. You know why he's saying that? Because they look entirely different. It's not like we know for sure if Mike recognizes him or not, because he doesn't get a say in the matter at all. Also, if we really want to use FNaF 6 lines as evidence, let's take a look at another Afton line.
That was easier than I thought it would be.
This line implies that William has tried to kill Mike before, and it was challenging for him. Or at least he knows what Mike is capable of. We have no reason to think William knows what Mike has lived through. Even if you believe he sent Mike to work at FNaF 1 and 2, he still wouldn't have known how difficult those nights were. The only time he would know for sure is if Mike was in FNaF 3, and he gave him a hard time trying to kill him. Although I guess Mike did survive Sister Location, which William sent him to, most likely knowing he was going to die. But even then, he wouldn't know if Sister Location was challenging for Mike or not, because he wasn't there. But something else I thought about is that this line kind of implies the opposite, because here's the thing. Last time Mike saw William, he was a normal person, right? And now, before him, he sees a corpse in a rabbit suit. I don't know how he'd have the chance to recognize William at all at this point, unless he already saw William in the Springtrap suit. Think about it from Mike's perspective. Last time you saw your dad, he was a normal person and alive. And now you see a corpse in a rabbit suit. And it's not even your dad's fucking suit, because Scraptrap's suit was completely different. You wouldn't just naturally jump to, yep, that's my dad. However, you might think that this rabbit with the corpse in it is the same as the other one, which did have your dad's corpse in it. But they do look completely different, so you're not sure. But then he basically confirms it by saying, yeah, it's me. Anyway, that's my basic point, is that if William thought Mike could recognize him in the first place, that probably means he has at least seen him as Springtrap. I don't know if that makes any sense to anyone else but me, but I just wanted to, throw that out there. Now back to the logbook. Yeah, the pacing of this video is all fucked up. Let's assume logbook 23 just for a moment. And Mike filled out the logbook in 2023, right before FNaF 3. Something that I'm genuinely surprised I've never seen anyone talk about is the very first page of the logbook, where Mike's name is crossed out with a note saying, looks like someone already wrote in this. You don't mind, right? The way to interpret this, under the theory I'm proposing that both Mike and Hudson worked at Fazbear Fright, is that he worked the night shift, but now he doesn't. And the next night guard got his logbook that he filled out before. And where would Mike go instead? The day shift, like Virgil in What We Found. Or he quit, but let's just go with the day shift for now. And this is only if you believe logbook 23, which I don't believe anymore, but I just thought it was important to throw in there. Using this, we could also say that the phone guy quotes are things Mike is saying to Hudson. As we know, Virgil and Hudson talked when they were switching positions, so if this theory is true, Mike and Hudson most likely would as well. So just to recap real quick. The theory is that while Hudson is the FNaF 3 player, Mike did work at Fazbear Fright as a day guard. Mike is the day guard, and he works alongside Hudson, who works the nights. This theory works well if you think Mike plays any role in Happiest Day, as instead of doing the minigames at night, he does them in the day. Now, a question you might be asking is, why does Mike wait 5 nights before burning down Fazbear Fright? Well, that's because it's a video game. Like, really, that's the only reason that makes sense. Same reason Hudson doesn't try to leave on the first night when Springtrap appears like he does in What We Found, because What We Found is a story and FNaF 3 is a game. I also want to talk about the possibility that both Mike and Hudson are the players in FNaF 3, and that after night 2, they switch. So the idea is that after Hudson's first night against Springtrap, he tells Mike when they're switching positions about Springtrap. Is like, wow, this guy, this rabbit, came alive at night, and like he was trying to like get into my office, I guess. And Mike is like, wow, that sounds stressful. I can take over for you. Something like that. The only real evidence for this is that in What We Found, Hudson only goes up against Springtrap for one night. So after he dies in the story, Virgil would most likely take up the night guard role. And in FNaF 3, if you believe Phone Dude to be Delane, then you could say he stops calling the player because they aren't his friend Hudson. They're just fucking random old guy. I find this really unlikely though, because there's never been a FNaF game where we switch protagonists without an indication of it, like in FNaF 2 with the different names on the paychecks. Okay, so let's talk about some problems with this theory. First of all, there's absolutely no way this is what Scott was intending when making FNaF 3. He was definitely not thinking, yes, I will have the night guard from the first game actually be the day guard, the unseen day guard, who burns down the location at the end of the game. And the protagonist of this game will just be some random guy. However, it could retroactively become that as time went on. And also, about using the Immortal and the Restless as evidence for Mike burning down Fazbear Fright. A problem arises when we take into account what happens next after that in the show. Vlad and Clara actually make up, which is not what happens with Mike and William after the FNaF 3 fire. I guess you could say, though, that it shouldn't be taken so literally, and the TV show is showing Mike burning William's house. It's basically supposed to be a hint to Mike burning down William's house, which would be Fazbear Fright, because that's where William lives. But, you know, that's a whole thing. That's what I think, though. And about Virgil, the man who spawned this whole idea in the first place. The thing with him is that he might not matter at all, because Scott probably did not write What We Found. Now, he could have made a request to the author of the story to include an older security guard, but we don't actually know what he told the author, so that's just pure speculation. I still think the inclusion of an older security guard could mean something, but
maybe it doesn't mean anything at all. Maybe it doesn't mean anything at all.
So when all is said and done, do I believe this theory? No, not really. I think it's a cool idea, but it does kind of rely on stretches, in my opinion. Honestly, I still think the FNaF 3 protagonist is Mike, mostly because I hate FNaF 6 as Mike and William's first confrontation. FNaF 3 is a boss fight against Springtrap, and in FNaF 6, he's just a basic enemy. I hate it as their final one too, but at least they would have a better first one under Mike guard. Sure, Hudson existing and not being the FNaF 3 guard in the main continuity is weird, but I don't really care. I'm gonna hang on to Mike FrightGuard for as long as possible. I mean, I can sort of understand why people like Hudson being the guard. William going after just some random person is cool, but I think it works better as a short story like What We Found. Anyways, like and subscribe. And also, I just want to say this now, I've been talking a lot about Mike FrightGuard, but if that ever gets debunked, and Scott comes out and says, no, Michael is not the FNaF 3 guard, I'm migrating to Jeremy guard. So yeah, okay, bye guys.